People think being hated is the worst thing a pack can do to you. It isn't. Eventually, hatred acknowledges that you exist. Being treated as worthless teaches you to disappear. I learned that before I was old enough to understand why everyone hated my name. Oren Breyer. 20 years ago, my father supposedly betrayed Black Hollow during a territorial war. They executed him for treason. My mother died months later. The council confiscated our home, our savings, everything. I was 5. Apparently, that was old enough to inherit a dead man's debt. So Black Hollow raised me inside the pack house. Not as family, as repayment. I cooked, cleaned, carried trays into council meetings I wasn't permitted to hear. And because my omega scent was so faint that most wolves could barely detect it, the pack gave me another name, the Empty Omega. At 25, I'd become very good at being invisible. Then, our alpha died. Everyone assumed his nephew, Draven Holt, would take control. They were wrong. Black Hollow was drowning in criminal debt, and the man who owned most of that debt was coming personally. Leander Vale, Enigma Alpha, Mafia boss, head of Vale International. A man powerful alphas supposedly avoided looking directly in the eyes. The pack house transformed overnight. Flowers appeared. Silver was polished. Unmated omegas wore clothes worth more than everything I owned. Draven stood near the front, as though leadership had already been promised to him. I wasn't allowed in the receiving line, naturally. I stood behind the servants carrying champagne. Then the doors opened. Leander entered. Conversation died. He was taller than I expected. Black suit. No visible weapon. He didn't need one to make the room nervous. One by one, families presented their sons. Leander barely looked at them. He passed the Omegas, past the Elders, past Draven. Then, he stopped, in front of me. I nearly looked behind myself. His eyes settled on my face. Your name. The entire hall seemed to hold its breath. Oren. His gaze sharpened. Oren what? My fingers tightened around the tray. Breyer. Something changed. 3 elderly council members went completely still. Leander's eyes moved to the birthmark beneath my ear. For one terrible second, I wondered if I'd done something wrong simply by existing. Then Leander turned toward the council. His voice was calm. Absolute. This Omega sits beside me tonight. Someone dropped a glass. Draven stared at me. The other Omegas looked insulted, but I barely noticed them, because across the hall, 3 council members were staring at me differently. Not with disgust, not even hatred. For the first time in my life, powerful men looked at Oren Breyer, and they looked afraid. By the time dinner began, everyone had decided why Leander Vale wanted me. I heard the whispers while carrying my last tray into the dining hall. Maybe the Mafia boss likes damaged things. An empty Omega? He'll be bored by morning. Then Draven stepped into my path. His smile was familiar. Cruel enough to hurt. Quiet enough to deny later. Congratulations, Oren. I tried walking around him. He blocked me. Enjoy being his entertainment while it lasts. Once, those words would have made me disappear. Tonight, I looked at him. Are you jealous? His smile vanished. I walked away before my courage could. Leander's table waited at the front, and beside him was my chair. Not behind him, not near the servants. Beside him. I sat carefully. Leander didn't flirt, didn't touch me. He barely looked at me. Instead, he questioned the council. Who controls Black Hollow's accounts? Elder Voss answered. Our Treasury Committee. Interesting. Leander opened a folder. Then perhaps your Treasury Committee can explain why $4.8 million disappeared in 6 years. Silence. His next question was stranger. Why are 17 families listed in old census records but absent from current ones? An elder cleared his throat. People leave. 17 entire households. Nobody answered. I forgot my food. Leander continued. And who owns the abandoned pharmaceutical facility north of the territory? My fingers tightened around my fork. Elder Voss said quickly. Nobody. It's been closed for decades. Leander leaned back. Northstar Laboratories. My fork hit the plate. Every eye turned toward me. I couldn't breathe. Northstar. I hadn't heard that name since childhood. My mother waking from nightmares. Her hands shaking. Her voice whispering. Northstar. Leander noticed. Of course he did. Hours later, I cornered him outside the council chamber. You knew. He stopped. You said that name because you were watching me. Yes. Anger burned through my humiliation. You didn't choose me because you wanted me. No. The answer hurt. Ridiculously. I laughed once. At least you're honest. I turned away. Oren. I stopped. Leander approached but left space between us. I chose you because someone has spent 20 years ensuring nobody important ever looks closely at you. My anger disappeared. What does that mean? He handed me an old ledger. I recognized the handwriting immediately. My father's. You were told he stole from Black Hollow. He did. No. Leander's gaze held mine. Your father wasn't stealing money. I opened the ledger. Pages of transactions filled it. Dates, accounts, payments. One name appeared repeatedly. Northstar. My hands began trembling. What was he doing? Leander answered quietly, following it. I read my father's ledger until sunrise. Every page dismantled something I'd believed about my life. Payments had moved from Black Hollow's treasury into shell companies. Those companies paid Northstar Laboratories. My father had circled names, dates, council signatures. At the bottom of one page he'd written, "They aren't developing medicine. Find the Omegas." I stared at the words until they blurred. Leander reopened my father's case that morning. The council protested immediately. A convicted traitor doesn't deserve. Leander looked at Elder Voss. The man stopped speaking. Investigators searched archives Black Hollow hadn't opened in 20 years. What they found was worse than treason. Northstar had developed illegal experimental pheromone suppressants. Poor Omegas were recruited with promises of medical treatment. Others were coerced. Several died. My father discovered the payments while serving as Black Hollow's financial auditor. He collected evidence. Then someone accused him of selling territorial information during the war. 3 days later, he was executed. I couldn't breathe when Leander told me. My mother, his silence answered first. Tell me. She tried leaving Black Hollow with you. I know. She got sick. Leander's jaw tightened. No, Oren. He placed another report before me. She was poisoned. The room tilted. My father wasn't a traitor. My mother hadn't simply died. Someone had destroyed them both, and then raised their child inside the same pack that murdered them. I don't remember sitting down. Only Leander's voice. Do you want me to stay? Not I'm staying. Not calm down. A question. I nodded. So he sat across from me. He didn't touch me. Didn't tell me everything would be fine. He simply stayed. Hours later, a physician arrived with another discovery. My medical records. I'd taken the same medication since childhood. Vitamin supplements, I whispered. The doctor shook his head. We tested them. My stomach dropped. What are they? Suppressants. Silence. Very small doses. Repeated exposure over years. I stared at him. My scent was chemically suppressed. My hands went cold. The empty Omega. The jokes. The failed shifts. 20 years believing something inside me was defective. None of it had been natural. I looked at Leander. Why would anyone do that to a child? His expression became terrifyingly still. That's what we're going to find out. The doctor hesitated. We may already know part of the answer. He placed my mother's genetic records beside mine. Your mother carried an exceptionally rare elite Omega bloodline. I stared at him. And so do you. I almost laughed. Then why suppress me? Leander looked toward the council chamber. His voice dropped. Because someone was terrified of what you'd become, if they didn't. For 20 years, Black Hollow had called me defective. The truth was worse. They had worked very hard to make sure I looked that way. The specialist placed my mother's records beside mine. Your maternal bloodline carried an unusually sensitive pheromone recognition trait. I frowned. What does that mean? Bonded families leave biological scent patterns. Most wolves can't distinguish them beyond close relatives. He pointed at my results. You potentially can. My stomach tightened. Northstar used blood and pheromone material from multiple Omega subjects, Leander said. I understood before he finished. If my abilities developed, you might recognize which bloodlines were connected to the experiments. Council families. People who had watched me grow up. People who had called me empty while secretly putting suppressants in my body. I laughed. It sounded terrible. They weren't ashamed of me. Leander watched me carefully. They were afraid of you. That should have felt empowering. It didn't. I wanted my childhood back. I wanted one morning where 5-year-old me hadn't swallowed medicine handed over by people helping murder him slowly. The treatment stopped immediately. Changes began within weeks. Smells sharpened first, then sounds. My wolf, once a weak presence at the edge of my mind, became louder, and my scent changed. People noticed. Of course they did. Pack members who had ignored me suddenly smiled. An elder's son who once refused to eat food I'd touched called me Mr. Breyer. I nearly threw his plate at him. Leander remained irritatingly unchanged. One evening, I finally asked why. Everyone treats me differently now. I noticed. You don't. He looked up from his paperwork. Should I? I'm an elite Omega. So, I stared. Nobody had ever made something extraordinary sound so unimpressive. Leander closed the file. You didn't become valuable when a doctor identified your bloodline, Oren. Something inside my chest tightened. You were valuable when everyone believed you had nothing. I looked away before he saw what those words did to me. Then someone knocked. Draven entered. I hadn't spoken to him since Leander arrived. He looked different. No smirk, no cruelty. His eyes were red. Oren, Leander stood. Draven glanced at him. This is private. I expected Leander to refuse. Instead, he looked at me. Do you want me to leave? I nodded. He did. Draven waited until the door closed. Then his face crumpled. I'm sorry. For which decade? He flinched. I deserve that. Then he said something I had imagined hearing from someone. Anyone. For most of my life. I treated you horribly because I was a coward. He stepped closer. My pulse jumped. Oren. His voice broke. I've loved you for years. I should have laughed in Draven's face. Instead, I asked, since when? Years. The answer hurt more than it pleased me. You had a strange way of showing it. I was supposed to inherit Black Hollow. Openly caring about a traitor's son would have destroyed that. So you protected your future by helping everyone destroy me. Draven looked ashamed. Yes, at least he admitted it. That should have made walking away easy. It didn't. Some wounded part of me still wanted proof that something from my old life had been real. Draven began finding reasons to be near me. Apologies became conversations. Conversations became memories of the rare childhood moments before he'd learned cruelty. Then Leander noticed. Be careful with him. I stiffened. Excuse me? Draven wants something. You don't know that. I know men who suddenly discover affection when power changes hands. Anger flashed through me. You don't get to decide who I trust. Leander went silent. I expected an order. Instead, he stepped backward. You're right. That stopped me. I am? Yes. His jaw tightened. I can warn you. I don't get to choose for you. 2 nights later, Draven asked me to meet privately. I found something about Northstar. That was enough. We met inside an abandoned council cottage. He poured me tea. I remember taking 3 sips. Then the room tilted. Draven? He wouldn't look at me. My legs collapsed. The last thing I saw was him catching the cup before it hit the floor. I woke strapped to a metal chair. The smell told me where I was before my eyes focused. Chemicals. Old concrete. Suppressants. Northstar. 3 former council members stood nearby. Draven was beside them. My stomach turned. What did they promise you? He closed his eyes. Oren. What? One elder answered for him. Black Hollow. I looked at Draven. Leadership. He'd sold me for the position he believed Leander had stolen from him. I'm sorry, Draven whispered. I laughed. It sounded almost calm. No. His eyes lifted. You're not sorry you betrayed me. I leaned against the restraints. You're sorry I survived long enough to know what you are. One conspirator stepped forward. They would kill me. Blame Leander. Make it appear the Mafia boss murdered the heir of the Briar bloodline to seize Black Hollow permanently. Pack war would follow. They kept talking. I stopped listening. My eyes moved toward the clock. 11:58. Draven noticed. Why are you smiling? 11:59. Because my father had died trusting one copy of the truth. I'd learned from him. Midnight arrived. Somewhere, several phones began ringing. I looked at Draven. Because you're already too late. At midnight, my father's evidence stopped belonging to me. That was the point. One councilman's phone rang. Then another. Draven pulled his from his pocket. Whatever he read drained the color from his face. What did you do? I smiled. Made sure you couldn't bury me beside my parents. Before meeting Draven, I'd scheduled everything we'd uncovered for automatic release. Financial records, Northstar files, medical reports, names, payments. Copies went to federal investigators, journalists, neighboring pack councils and attorneys, representing surviving test subjects. If I didn't cancel the transmission before midnight, everything became public. An elder grabbed my throat. Stop it. I can't. Call them back. That's not how email works. And he struck me. Draven flinched. I laughed. You wanted to be alpha? His face tightened. Look at you. Sirens sounded outside. The conspirators panicked. I twisted my wrist again. For 20 minutes, I'd been working one restraint against a damaged metal edge. Pain tore across my skin. Then, snap. My right hand came free. Draven stared. I ripped the second restraint loose enough to stand. The doors exploded inward. Officers flooded Northstar. And behind them came Leander. His eyes found me immediately. Something terrifying crossed his face when he saw the blood. He started toward me, then stopped. He looked at the broken restraint hanging from my wrist. You did this? Most of it. For the first time since I'd met him, Leander smiled. Of course you did. He didn't sweep me into his arms, didn't announce he'd rescued me. He simply unlocked the final restraint around my ankle. Draven was dragged toward us. Leander, please. The Mafia boss barely looked at him. Instead, he turned to me. Your decision. Draven's eyes widened. Oren. I could have asked for blood. 25 years ago, men like him had killed my father, because execution was easier than accountability. I wasn't repeating them. I want him alive. Draven sagged with relief. Too soon. I stepped closer. I want you to watch when my father's name is cleared. His breathing stopped. I want you to watch Black Hollow learn what you did. Then I smiled. And I want you alive long enough to watch me become everything you helped convince me I could never be. Hours later, the surviving council was arrested. Black Hollow had no legitimate government. Everyone expected Leander to claim permanent control. Instead, he stood before the pack. Black Hollow will elect its next leader. The room erupted. Then he said, I nominate Oren Briar. Silence. Every face turned toward me. Months ago, I would have mistaken that nomination for salvation. Now I knew better. I stood, looked directly at the most powerful alpha in the room, and said, no. The silence after my refusal was almost beautiful. Leander stared at me, not angry, curious. No? He repeated, no. Someone behind me whispered, has he lost his mind? Maybe, but for the first time, it was entirely mine to lose. I turned toward Black Hollow. If I accept leadership, Because the strongest alpha in this room gives it to me. What exactly changes? Nobody answered. My father died because a handful of powerful people decided they had the right to control everyone else. I looked toward the empty council seats. I'm not replacing them. An elder asked, "Then what do you want?" "An election." Murmurs spread. If Black Hollow wants me, I lifted my chin. They can choose me themselves. I glanced at Leander. He smiled. Then we'll have an election. For the next 6 weeks I campaigned. Not as Leander Vale's Omega, not as the elite bloodline Northstar feared. As Oren Breyer, I proposed independent financial audits, elected councils, protections against forced medication, restitution for Northstar survivors, restoration of property stolen from falsely accused families. At first, powerful households dismissed me. Then the people they'd spent years ignoring started speaking. Kitchen workers, widows, poor families. Omega's I'd secretly helped when I barely had enough for myself. One elderly beta stood during a public forum. When my mate died, the council wouldn't help me bury him. He pointed toward me. Oren paid for the coffin. I hadn't known anyone remembered. They did. Leander never attended my campaign events. When I confronted him, he said, "If I'm standing behind you, people will wonder whether they're voting for you or fearing me." So he stayed away. Election night arrived. I expected to lose. Then, the first district reported. I was ahead. Then the second. The third. By midnight, I wasn't simply winning. I had won overwhelmingly. For 20 years, I hadn't been allowed inside council meetings, unless I carried a tray. Now I walked into that same chamber as Black Hollow's first elected Omega leader. The room stood for me. I nearly cried. Later, when everyone had gone, Leander appeared at the doorway. "Leader Breyer." I rolled my eyes. "Don't start." He smiled. Then his expression softened. "There's something I should tell you before I leave." My chest tightened. "Leave?" "Black Hollow belongs to its people again." He stepped closer. "My work here is finished. For reasons I wasn't ready to examine." The thought of Leander Vale leaving hurt, far more than I expected. And suddenly, there was one question I desperately needed answered. Why had he chosen me that first night? Why me? Leander stopped. I stood behind the council desk that had once been forbidden to people like me. "That first night," I said. "Why did you cross the entire room?" I touched the birthmark beneath my ear. Was it this? No. My father? No. Northstar? No. I frowned. Then what? Leander looked toward the window. "Your coat." I stared at him. "My what?" "Before I entered the reception, I saw you outside." Memory returned slowly. An elderly kitchen worker had been unloading crates in the cold. His hands were shaking. I'd given him my coat. "You saw that?" Everyone inside was rehearsing introductions. Powerful families were arranging their children like merchandise. Leander looked at me. "You didn't even know I'd arrived." I laughed softly. "So you chose me because I gave away a coat?" "No." He stepped closer. "I noticed you because of the coat." His voice lowered. "I chose you because of everything you did afterward. For 25 years, I'd wanted someone powerful to say I mattered. Now, the most powerful alpha I'd ever known was standing in front of me. And strangely, I didn't need the words anymore. That was how I knew I was ready to hear them. Leander transferred the final financial authority back to Black Hollow. Over the following weeks, I formed a new council. Not only alphas, omegas, betas, workers, Northstar survivors. My father's conviction was formally overturned. Our stolen property was returned. And through all of it, Leander never tried to turn my success into evidence that he'd been right about me. Then, the morning came when he was supposed to leave. His car waited outside. I found him at the pack house entrance. "So that's it?" He raised an eyebrow. "You rejected my appointment." "I rejected the position." Very dramatically. "You're annoying. I've been told." He turned toward the car. "Leander." He stopped. My heart hammered. For once, nobody was choosing for me. Not the council, not my past, not an alpha. Me. I crossed the distance between us, then kissed him. Leander went completely still. I pulled back. His eyes were darker. Oren. What? Are you certain? I smiled. There it was again. Choice. Yes. His hand rose toward my face, but stopped before touching me. I leaned into it myself. Only then did he kiss me back. Slowly. Carefully. Nothing claimed. Nothing taken. When we separated, Leander rested his forehead against mine. I thought you were leaving, I whispered. I was. And now? He smiled. Now I'm waiting to see what you choose next. Draven wasn't executed. That would have been too easy. He lost his inheritance, his succession rights, his reputation, then his freedom. The surviving council members responsible for Northstar lived long enough to watch my father's conviction formally overturned. A monument was erected outside the council building. Not to me, to him. Oren Breyer, he followed the truth, when power demanded silence. The first time I saw it, I cried, quietly. Leander stood beside me without pretending grief needed fixing. My childhood home was returned too. Everyone assumed I'd move into it. I didn't. Instead, I turned it into Breyer House, a refuge for rejected Omegas, abused pack members, abandoned pups. Anyone Black Hollow had taught to believe they were inconvenient, defective, or unwanted. Above the entrance, I had 3 words carved into stone. You belong here. Northstar was demolished. In its place, we built a medical center, providing free treatment to survivors of illegal pheromone experimentation. And Leander, he remained terrifying. Just not to me. 2 years passed before we discussed a mating bond. No political arrangement, no public pressure. No alpha deciding an omega belonged to him. Our ceremony took place inside the same hall, where I'd once carried champagne behind the servants. This time, those servants sat among the honored guests. Leander stood before me. The traditional moment arrived. His hand touched my neck. Then stopped. Hundreds were watching. The most powerful alpha in the territory could have assumed my answer. He didn't. May I? 1 question, 2 words, and somehow they contained everything my life had once lacked. Choice. I looked around the hall, at the elected council, at Northstar survivors, at families my father died trying to protect, at people who once called me the empty Omega. Then I looked at Leander. Yes, years ago, everyone believed my story changed, because Leander Vale walked into Black Hollow and chose the outcast over everyone else. They were wrong. Leander didn't give me worth. He noticed what powerful people had spent 20 years trying to erase. And eventually, Black Hollow noticed too. My name now stood above shelters, hospitals, laws, reforms. But none of those things mattered, because they proved I deserved respect. I had always deserved it. That was the lesson Black Hollow learned too late. The most powerful alpha had simply been the first powerful man, intelligent enough to recognize what was already there. And by the time the world finally chose Oren Breyer, I had already chosen myself.